Hey everyone, I am absolutely thrilled to jump into today's explainer because we are breaking down the incredibly fascinating and honestly vastly misunderstood psychology behind silence. We're going straight to our source material today to decode the hidden language of stillness. And I promise you, by the time we're done here, you are never going to look at a quiet moment the exact same way again. So you gotta ask yourself, what is the quietest person in the room actually thinking? It's a pretty relatable question, isn't it? Seriously, we have all been there. You're in a crowded room, noise is practically bouncing off the walls, and there's always that one person who is just perfectly still. We kind of default to this age-old assumption that the loudest person in the room is inherently the strongest, right? Or the most confident. But today, we are completely flipping that script. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly why we need to rethink quietness entirely. Think about society's view for a second. We tend to look at silence and instantly slap a label on it. Weakness, shyness, or maybe just flat-out boredom? But the psychological reality? Well, our sources show that silence is actually a highly sophisticated tool of emotional intelligence. It's not a flaw at all. It's a calculated advantage. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's the structured journey we are taking together today to decode this hidden language. We're going to explore comfort with the self, how quiet people act as data collectors, the use of shields and mysteries, the different flavors of silence, the threshold of response, and finally, how to weaponize silence. Let's get started.
Number 1. Comfort with the self and internal security.
So before we look at how a quiet person interacts with the rest of the room, we've got to understand their internal mechanics. Fundamentally, a profound level of silence reflects a profound level of self-acceptance. To really get that, we need to define what the rest of us are usually doing, which is filler talk. It's that mindless chatter most people use just to drown out their own thoughts. If someone has the ability to sit in a room with you, or even sit completely alone, without feeling this frantic, burning need to bridge the gap with filler talk, it indicates a massive level of internal security. They are just deeply comfortable with who they are. Which brings us to an absolutely crucial point. Silence means not needing constant likes or verbal nods to feel present. Just think about how this applies to your daily life. We live in a world that is practically desperate for external validation. But truly secure people? They don't need the room to acknowledge them every 5 seconds just to know they exist. Their presence is totally self-validated. Moving on to Section 2, the ultimate data collectors and observation bias. Now let's shift gears from the internal stuff to the external mechanics. This is where we start to see exactly why quiet individuals are often the absolute sharpest intellects in any room. Consider the noisy majority. Mostly, they aren't actually listening to you. They're simply waiting for their turn to speak. But contrast that with the silent minority who are engaged in true active listening. While everyone else is distracted, mentally rehearsing their own upcoming monologue, the quiet person is just soaking up vital data. They are catching body language, sudden tone shifts, and glaring inconsistencies in what people are claiming. And because they're collecting all this high-quality data, we get this really fascinating effect: high market value. This is the ultimate power move of speaking less. By rationing their words, they naturally increase the weight and value of every single thing they do say. I mean, have you ever noticed that when the quietest person finally decides to speak, the entire room literally tilts in their direction to listen? That right there is market value in action. All right, Section 3, shields, weapons, and mysteries. The dark side. Now look, it's not all just Zen-like peaceful observation. We've got to look at this neutrally, because silence isn't always about inner peace. Very often, it's a highly strategic, calculated choice. Let's impartially unpack these defense mechanisms. First up, you have the wall. For people operating in high-stakes environments or folks with a history of trauma, silence acts as a shield. If they don't speak, they don't reveal vulnerabilities. Then there's the cold shoulder, which is a tool used for emotional regulation or even manipulation to wrestle back control of a slipping situation. And finally, there's the fascinating mystery factor. That mystery factor relies completely on this concept called the information gap. Basically, it's the natural human urge to over-reveal our own secrets just to fill up a silent void. Think about it for a second. Have you ever sat right across from someone who just wouldn't talk and you found yourself nervously babbling, like giving away all your secrets just to break the awkward tension? Yep, that is the psychological trap of the information gap.
Which brings us to Section 4, the 4 flavors of silence and reading the room.
Now, what's really interesting here is that silence has layers, and not all quiet moments mean the exact same thing. If a person is processing complex data, that's pensive silence. Whatever you do, don't interrupt them. If social frequencies are clearly clashing, well, that's your awkward silence. But look at these other two. Intimate silence is actually the peak of connection, where words aren't even necessary anymore. And stoic silence? That is pure emotional self-control during a conflict. Knowing these specific flavors lets you read people with incredible accuracy.
Next up, Section 5, the threshold of response and emotional regulation.
This right here is the psychological concept that explains exactly why silent people don't just impulsively react to every single stimulus around them. The threshold of response is the capacity to process emotions internally before actually displaying a reaction. While the rest of the room might flare up in sudden hot anger, or maybe burst into nervous, uncomfortable laughter, the silent person just absorbs the hit. They process it internally first, and that is an absolute hallmark of high executive function. And having that high threshold creates a super vital distinction, the difference between having a reaction versus making a calculated choice. Having a reaction is automatic, and it's often messy. Making a calculated choice, however, is completely deliberate. That tiny delay, that fraction of a second where a silent person chooses not to immediately react, that is the ultimate power differential in a high-conflict, stressful environment.
And our final piece of the puzzle, Section 6, how to weaponize silence to command respect.
So the crucial point is, how do you actually apply this in real life? Time for the practical payoff. Here is your definitive toolkit for daily interactions. Step 1 is the pregnant pause, and we'll get into the specific mechanics of that in just a second. Step 2 is the no silence. When someone gives you a terrible deal or maybe throws out an insult, don't argue back. Just look at them in total silence. It literally forces them to justify their own bad position. And step 3 is the listening ear. By simply being the person who genuinely listens, you naturally become a magnet for trust.
Now, I want to circle back to that pregnant pause for just a second because of one incredibly surprising number: 5. 5 seconds. Here's a psychological hack straight from our sources. After you ask a question, wait exactly 5 uncomfortable seconds longer than you normally would. Just 5 seconds. If you can hold your nerve in that silence, the other person will almost always crack, and they'll give you way more information than they ever intended to share.
So as we wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with a thought. A bit of a provocative one, actually. The next time the room goes completely quiet, look around. Who actually holds the power? Is it the person rushing to fill the air with empty words, or is it the silent architect, sitting back, collecting the data, and making a calculated choice? I challenge you to sit in the silence today and observe the true dynamic of the room. Thanks for learning with me.